Chris Benoit. On June 24, 2007, 40-year-old Chris Benoit was found hanging from a weight training machine in his Fayetteville, Georgia home. Benoit had been one of professional wrestling's most respected technicians, a two-time world champion known for his precision and obsessive work ethic. By 2007, he had spent 2 decades absorbing chair shots, headbutts, and unprotected blows to the skull. That weekend, Benoit missed a house show in Texas. WWE officials called repeatedly. When sheriff's deputies entered the home on Monday afternoon, they found 3 bodies. The timeline reconstructed from forensic evidence was methodical. On Friday night, Benoit had strangled his wife Nancy in an upstairs office and bound her wrists and feet. The following day, he suffocated their 7-year-old son Daniel in his bedroom. He placed Bibles next to both bodies. On Sunday, Benoit went down to his home gym. He fixed a cable from a lat pull-down machine around his neck and released the weight stack. He died from compression of the neck. WWE aired a 3-hour tribute special the next night before the full scope of the killings became public. By the following morning, the company had erased Benoit from its history. His matches were pulled. His name was banned from broadcasts. His Hall of Fame placement effectively voided. Months later, neuropathologist Bennett Omalu examined Benoit's brain tissue. The damage was consistent with a man in his 80s suffering from advanced dementia. Years of untreated concussions had produced severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy. The most disciplined technician in wrestling history had been operating with a brain that no longer functioned. The exact role CTE played in the killings remains debated. Hulk Hogan. On July 24, 2025, 71-year-old Terry Bollea, known to the world as Hulk Hogan, died at a hospital in Clearwater, Florida. Hogan had defined professional wrestling for 2 generations. A 6-time WWE champion and the face of WrestleMania, he was one of the few wrestlers recognized far outside the sport. 6 months before his death, he had appeared on WWE's Netflix premiere alongside The Rock and John Cena. In the months leading up to that morning, Hogan's health had become the subject of public speculation. He had undergone neck fusion surgery on May 14, 2025. Reports surfaced that he was in a coma. Others claimed he was dying. His wife, Sky Daly, issued public denials, stating his heart was strong and there was no lack of oxygen or brain damage. The denials were not entirely accurate. The medical examiner's report, released a week after his death, revealed 2 conditions that had not been publicly disclosed. Hogan had chronic lymphocytic leukemia, a cancer of the blood and bone marrow. He also suffered from atrial fibrillation, an irregular heartbeat that significantly raises stroke and cardiac risk. Neither had been mentioned in any prior statement. On the morning of July 24th, paramedics responded to a cardiac arrest call at his Clearwater home at 9:51 a.m. First responders attempted to revive him for 30 minutes. He was transported to Morton Plant Hospital and pronounced dead. The cause was acute myocardial infarction, a heart attack. Hogan had built a career on the appearance of indestructibility, the shirt ripping, the leg drop, the perpetual tan. The body that had been packaged as superhuman had been quietly failing for years behind public denials. Owen Hart. On May 23, 1999, 34-year-old Owen Hart fell approximately 78 feet inside Kansas City's Kemper Arena. Hart had been performing for the World Wrestling Federation as the masked character Blue Blazer. The match was the over-the-edge pay-per-view. The planned entrance had the Blazer descending from the rafters by harness and rope, stopping short of the ring, and pretending to struggle with the rigging. Hart was suspended above the ring in a quick-release harness. The harness had been designed for stunt work in films, where performers needed to detach themselves quickly after a fall. It used a small trigger mechanism that could be activated with light pressure. While Hart waited for his cue, the release mechanism triggered prematurely. Witnesses heard him say something briefly into his microphone before he fell. He dropped 78 feet. His chest struck the top rope. The impact tore his aorta. He bounced into the ring and came to rest face down. Paramedics worked on him in the arena. He was pronounced dead at a hospital from internal bleeding caused by blunt chest trauma. The pay-per-view continued. Announcer Jim Ross informed the television audience that this was not part of the show. The matches scheduled after Hart's segment went ahead as planned. Hart's body had not yet left the building. Hart's widow Martha sued the WWF and the harness manufacturer. The case was settled in 2000 for a sum reported around $18 million. The harness had never been intended for entrance stunts. Owen Hart's name remains absent from the WWE Hall of Fame at his family's request. Andre the Giant. On January 27, 1993, 46-year-old Andrei Rene Roussimoff died in his sleep in a Paris hotel room. Better known as Andre the Giant, he had traveled to France to attend his father's funeral and checked into the hotel alone the night before. Hotel staff found him the following morning. Andre suffered from acromegaly, a condition caused by a pituitary tumor that produced excessive growth hormone. The tumor had given him his extraordinary size. By the late 1980s, his build height was 7 feet 4 inches and his weight had reached 520 pounds. Doctors in the early 1980s had urged him to have the tumor removed. Andre refused. He reportedly believed the surgery would alter his appearance and end his wrestling career. The condition continued unchecked. His joints deteriorated. His heart, no longer able to support his expanding body, enlarged dangerously. By the time of WrestleMania 3 in 1987, he could barely climb the steps to the ring without assistance. To manage chronic pain, Andre drank heavily. His tolerance became legendary on the wrestling circuit. Accounts from peers describe him consuming over 100 beers in a single sitting on multiple occasions. The drinking accelerated the damage to his heart and liver. In Paris, on the night of January 27th, his heart failed. The official cause of death was congestive heart failure. He was found in his bed. Andre's body was so large that French undertakers could not arrange transport home. He was cremated in France. His ashes were flown to North Carolina and scattered on his ranch. The body that had made him famous had killed him. Superfly Snuka. On May 10, 1983, 23-year-old Nancy Argentino lay dying on a bed at the George Washington Motor Lodge in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Yellow fluid ran from her mouth and nose. Her boyfriend, WWF wrestler Jimmy Superfly Snuka, had returned from a taping at the Allentown Fairgrounds and waited an estimated 12 to 24 hours before calling for help. By the time paramedics arrived, resuscitation was no longer possible. The autopsy documented more than 36 cuts and bruises across her entire body, a pattern consistent with prolonged physical abuse. She had died from her head striking a stationary object. The pathologist recommended the case be investigated as a homicide. Snuka gave at least 6 different accounts of what had happened. He told the responding officer he had shoved her during an argument. He told paramedics she had hit her head on concrete. He told detectives she had slipped during a bathroom break on the drive home. The accounts kept shifting. No charges were filed. The Lehigh County District Attorney closed the case in June 1983. A grand jury would later hear evidence that Snuka had assaulted Argentino in a Syracuse hotel room 4 months before her death. Snuka continued wrestling. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 1996. Argentino's family refused to let the case die. They filed a federal lawsuit in 1985 that quietly preserved the autopsy report in court archives. In 2013, a reporter from the Allentown Morning Call located that file and published the autopsy. The district attorney reopened the case. In 2015, a grand jury indicted Snuka on third-degree murder. By then, he was 72 and showing signs of dementia. The court ruled him mentally incompetent on January 3, 2017. He died of stomach cancer 12 days later. The Superfly who had thrown himself off a steel cage in front of 20,000 people died in a hospice bed without ever testifying. Shad Gaspard. On May 17, 2020, 39-year-old Shad Gaspard was swimming with his 10-year-old son Aryeh at Venice Beach in Los Angeles. Gaspard had wrestled for WWE for 6 years, primarily as one half of the tag team Crime Time. He stood 6 feet 7 inches and weighed close to 300 pounds. After leaving WWE in 2010, he had transitioned to film and indie wrestling appearances. That afternoon, he had taken Aryeh to the beach for a swim. A rip current pulled both of them away from the shore. Lifeguards spotted the swimmers in distress and moved in. Gaspar, treading water with his son in the open ocean, made a decision. When the first lifeguard reached them, Gaspard pushed Aryeh toward the rescuer and instructed him to save his son first. Aryeh was pulled to safety. The lifeguard returned for Gaspard. Before he could reach him, a large wave came over Gaspard's head and pulled him under. He did not resurface. The U.S. Coast Guard and Los Angeles County lifeguards searched the waters for the next 3 days. Helicopters scanned the coastline. Volunteers walked the beaches. On May 20th, Gaspard's body washed ashore in Venice Beach. Aryeh survived without serious injury. He had been at the surface when the rescue began because his father had been holding him there. In interviews afterward, the lifeguards confirmed that Gaspard had had time to be rescued first. He had used that time to push his son away. Shad Gaspard was buried with honors by the wrestling community. He had spent 6 years entertaining audiences as a fictional tough guy. The single act for which he is now remembered required no script,